Hey everyone, I decided that I would use video today to share the historical item that came to my mind as not quite as I was writing the assignment for Unit 2 for last week, but certainly as I read through all of the various posts that you all submitted. I read those this morning and I had a lot of fun reading the different historical items, whether that was a tree, a sarcophagus, um, books, of course, uh, rights for women, as we've lost Ruth Bader Ginsburg this weekend. Such a wide range of things that came to your minds, movies as well, that resonate in some way, some aspect of our history and our identity are contained in those things for us. And I really appreciate the way that you were willing to share those things with all of us, um, and the ways that you thoughtfully applied our historical thinking standards. So I say standards, but we read a model for how to think historically using the 5 C's that Andrews and Burke proposed in their 2007 blog post for the American Historical Association. Um, and so, again, it was just fascinating and gratifying and super enjoyable to just see all of the different places that everyone's coming from as we're thinking about what resonates with us when we think about historical items. So I keep saying that Medium's good for doing things other than the written word, if you choose to, and so I wanted to make a video here to show you this historical item. Mine's a book, but it's not a book that's published, let me see if I can get this in the camera correctly, on the open market. It's a book that my great-grandfather's family put together. So he and his brothers and sisters wrote down their personal histories, and then their kids, so my grandparents, that generation, uh, self-published them in this book. And honestly, of my great grandpa and all of his brothers and sisters, he had 10, I believe. If I'm remembering correctly, I'd have to go through the table of contents and count again. Um, I only really knew him growing up. He lived until I was probably about 17 or 18. My family lived in Salt Lake City, in the suburbs of Salt Lake City in Utah. And my great grandpa and my grandparents on my dad's side, they lived next door to each other in a smaller rural town in northern Utah called Morgan. So it is my last name. Well, I was about to say unfortunately, it's really neither here nor there, but we have no connection to the people that the town was named for, even though our last name is Morgan. That's a question that people always have since my family comes from there. But this book is really kind of fascinating in terms of preserving family history, of course. As I mentioned, I knew my great-grandpa. I remember him as an electrician. I remember when I was about 5 years old and we moved into the house that my parents are still living in. He came down with my grandpa to help my dad run electricity out to the shed that we have in the backyard, to make sure all of that kind of stuff was working well, working right. And I got this book when I was probably about 19 or 20, if I'm remembering right. And so I went to his entry and read his history. And it may be a generational thing, but they're all a little bit formulaic in terms of the way they're writing about themselves. I also, my family is Mormon, so there's a big emphasis on family history and on genealogy within Mormon faith, and so that's part of the reason that they wanted to keep a personal history. But I bring that point up just to mention, some of the things that they're formulaic about. They're formulaic about certain details that in the Mormon faith are necessary to do their religious work for them once they've passed on. So so that's something about the way that this was put together. But I'm going to open this book up to the page where his chapter, I should say. I'm going to turn a couple of pages because he talks about growing up, being a young kid, but then he talks about when he married my great grandma, and there's a picture of them there. And I bring this up because it was something that just stuck out to me when I was a younger person, when I first got this book and I read through. And he talks about getting married. They were married in the Salt Lake Temple in 1925. Then after they were married, they went to Bountiful, which is just north of Salt Lake, for kind of a brief honeymoon. They saw a vaudeville show, stayed in a hotel. It says, after the show, we spent our first night together. Then on the next page, the next sentence, the next morning I got up sick. And I know he didn't mean anything really by it. I'm sure he probably just didn't feel well the next morning. But it's, he got married, he gets up sick the next morning, and as a younger man who was single and not going to be married for a while at that point, I thought that was the funniest way to put that. And so it's something that kind of stuck with me and resonated with me. As I was rereading this today, though, I noticed when he talks about his family, his brothers and sisters and their births and their lives, he mentions that his oldest brother, Lorenzo, died of the flu in 1918. And, being in this pandemic, and a couple of us have talked about the imperfect parallels that have been drawn between our current moment and the flu pandemic of 1918 during World War I, the end of World War I. But it's still a comparison that people are drawing. And so that's something that stuck out to me, not only as I read this, but as I was reading the work that you posted on Medium this morning, is that even stories that seem like they only have personal, direct relevance to us and our families, they still give us little windows into much larger national world events, or even at the community level. So I think that's something to kind of keep in mind as we look at our own histories, is not to discount our personal histories as, I don't think most of us would say they were unimportant, but that they're important only to us. Because I think that our histories have broader significance than we often give them. And they're things that historians in the future will be interested in. They want to put that sort of human face on the past that so often gets lost when they're only able to access records about the most important people in a society or the most important events. But when they have the records of people who are writing about their wedding night and waking up sick the next morning, they get these little comical pieces of our humanity. They get to see culture and what was significant and what our values were. Through these kinds of accounts. And so I just wanted to say, again, that's something that is significant, and it can be significant beyond just ourselves. So I hope that you all enjoyed this assignment. I surely did, and again, thank you for sharing the things that are meaningful to you. It really meant a lot to me to read them, and I hope that you're having a good week thus far.